Okay, if you're anything like me, you've probably watched a ton of crime shows. And you know the drill. The brilliant forensic scientist working in some crazy high-tech lab manages to solve a super complex case in, what, like under an hour? It's always so dramatic, so fast, and everything is just so neat and tidy. But what if I told you the reality is way more complicated, and that the biggest hurdles aren't even scientific, they're ethical? Yeah, let's really get into this. And this quote right here from William Curran, man, it just cuts right to the heart of the issue. The real struggle isn't always about just finding the evidence. It's about this constant question. Who do you really work for? Is it the police, the DA's office, or is it something bigger, something more abstract, like the truth itself? That's the tightrope these pros are walking every single day. Yeah, because in the real world, you don't just wrap things up before the last commercial break. Nope. It's all about navigating this immense pressure that's coming at you from every single direction. You've got law enforcement pushing you, the legal system breathing down your neck, and on top of all that, the crushing weight of knowing that what you do, your work, can literally change someone's life forever. All right, so first things first, we have to talk about something called the CSI effect. We're going to deconstruct some of the biggest myths that TV and movies have built up around forensic science. So let's just break down the fantasy versus the reality here. The CSI myth, you've got one person who's somehow a master of ballistics, DNA, and crime scene investigation all wrapped into one. The reality, it's a whole team of incredibly specialized scientists. On TV, cases get solved in a couple of days, maybe a week. But in the real world, these things can take years. And yeah, the instruments are amazing, but they're just tools. They don't do all the work. It takes critical human expertise to actually understand what the results mean. Okay, let's go to where it all starts, the evidence at the scene. This is ground zero, where the search for truth really begins. Now, the job at a crime scene is not about those dramatic aha moments you see on TV. It's slow, careful, methodical work. The mantra is document, preserve, and collect. And there's no standard playbook for this stuff because every scene is totally unique. So investigators have to be flexible. They have to improvise, and honestly, they have to be pretty creative to figure out how to get what they need without messing anything up. And this quote, this is pretty much the golden rule of forensics. If something is not documented, it did not happen. And that is so, so critical because a case might not actually go to court for years. So those super detailed notes, the photos, the sketches, they are everything. They're what the scientists will rely on later. They provide all the context. You could have the most amazing piece of evidence, but if it wasn't documented properly at the scene, it basically doesn't exist. And all that documentation leads us to this hugely important concept, the chain of custody. Seriously, this is non-negotiable. The best way to think about it is like a resume for a piece of evidence. It's a perfect, unbroken log of every single person who touched that evidence, where it went, and when. If there is even one tiny break in that chain, just one gap, that evidence can get thrown out of court. It doesn't matter how crucial it is, it's gone. All right, so we've got our evidence from the scene. Let's follow it inside the crime lab. This is where all the analysis happens, and believe me, the pressure to be perfect is just immense. So how do they make sure their results are accurate? Well, they use something called controls. It's like a scientific safety net. Basically, they test known samples right alongside the unknown evidence. A positive control makes sure the test is actually working, and a negative control makes sure the test isn't just saying yes to everything. Without these controls, the results are pretty much meaningless. They are the absolute backbone of good science. But you know, what happens when things do go wrong? Well, there are two main types of errors. A type 1 error is a false positive. That's when a test says something is there, but it really isn't. This is the absolute nightmare scenario, right? Because it could point the finger at a totally innocent person. Then you have a type 2 error, a false negative. That's the opposite. The test misses something that is there. And that can mean a guilty person walks free. So when you look at those two mistakes, our legal system has a very strong opinion about which one is worse. And this quote sums it up perfectly. The whole system is built around the idea of innocent until proven guilty. So a type 1 error, a false positive, that wrongly points to an innocent person, is considered a far, far more terrible mistake. It goes against everything the justice system stands for. And that's because, as this says, ethics isn't always black and white. It would be great if science always gave a simple yes or no answer. But the truth is, scientists are constantly working in this gray area. They have to use their professional judgment and make calls that you just can't find in a textbook. And that gray area gets even murkier when you consider this fundamental culture clash. Think about it. Forensic science. Its goal is to find the objective truth. The method is pure objectivity. The culture is impartial. Now look at law enforcement. Their goal is to get the bad guy. Their method is to build a case. Their culture is adversarial. See the problem? These are not the same goals. And that pressure on the scientists to help get the bad guy, instead of just finding the truth, that's where so many ethical problems start. Okay, so let's follow this journey to its final destination, the courtroom. This is where the scientist has to get on the stand and somehow translate all this complex science into testimony that a judge and jury can actually understand. When they're in court, they take on this very specific role, the expert witness. And their job is not to be a cheerleader for the prosecution or the defense. Their one and only job is to be an impartial teacher. They're there to help the court, the judge and the jury, understand what the scientific evidence really means. But as this quote points out, making that switch from the lab to the courtroom is a massive culture shock. I mean, think about it. The world of science is all about collaboration and peer review. The legal system, it's adversarial by design. It's literally someone's job to get up there and try to poke holes in everything you've done, maybe even make you look inconfident. It is a completely different world. So, how do you survive on the witness stand? Well, there's some really important do's. If a question is confusing, ask for clarification. If a lawyer interrupts you, you just stop talking immediately. You have to stay impartial, and you should always speak directly to the jury. Remember, you're there to be a teacher, not an advocate for one side. And of course, there are just as many don'ts, big ones. Never, ever guess if you don't know an answer. Don't volunteer information that wasn't asked for. That's a classic trap. Don't get defensive or argumentative. And this last one is so important. Know the difference between a scientific opinion, which is based on data, and an opinion of a scientist, which is just, your personal feeling. That has no place in court. All right, let's bring this all home. We've talked about the myths, the crime scene, the lab, the courtroom. Now let's talk about the pressures, the pitfalls, and the incredible human integrity it takes to do this job right. I mean, the pressure really does come from everywhere. You have crime labs with insane backlogs and tiny budgets. You've got that constant conflict between the goals of science and the goals of law enforcement. You're being grilled in an adversarial system. And on top of all that, you carry this incredible weight of knowing your work could send someone to prison or set them free. And when all that pressure causes someone to break, the results can be catastrophic. We're not talking about simple mistakes here. This is forensic misconduct. Things like planting evidence, falsifying lab results, even just ignoring evidence that might clear a suspect. These aren't just errors, they're actions that poison the entire well of justice. Because really, when you boil it all down, this is what it's about. The cops are there to get the bad guy. The lawyers are there to fight for their client. But the forensic scientist, their client is the truth. That's it. No matter who that truth helps or who it hurts. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. In this whole complex system, with all these competing interests and all these pressures, who does the evidence truly serve?